이대로 널 보내면 너는 평생 집으로 돌아오지 않겠지. 널 막아 이곳에 머물게 한들 내게 남는 건 없을 거야. 하지만 공허한 후회가 심장을 파고드는 것보단 낫지 않겠니? 좋아, 시작하자고.
Alright, hello everyone, and welcome back to another Limbus Company video. Today we're going to be fighting the Index Nurse Father, Rain, the final boss of Canto 9, using only the Corp Ryoshu. Now, I would like to start by saying that I did actually try to beat this with base Ryoshu first, because, like, you know, it's more interesting if the base identity is capable of doing it, but it is substantially more difficult, and so much difficult that it's like I did eventually give up because I deemed it pretty much impossible. I don't know. Maybe there is some way if you bash your head against this wall long enough that base Ryoshu could manage to do it, but I couldn't find the way. But basically, the main actual strategy of this fight in order to beat it solo is basically survive his Furiosa attack, because the big thing about that attack is that it does not activate defense skills, meaning that you cannot evade it, which is that's the big thing about it. So you have to take all of the damage, and normally in a normal gameplay, right, it's like it's not that bad of a skill if you just beat it in a clash, because, you know, you have like 7 health bars to work with, because it's, you know, unfocused volley, so it hits everyone individually. But if you're only using one identity, then every single coin lands on that single identity, and it does, even by winning a clash, it still does like over pretty much your entire health bar. So like the early turn of this fight is just dodging everything, because you want to make sure that he does not actually fulfill any of the prescripts, which means you cannot take any damage up until turn 5. And this is important because he has a unique debuff, like, interaction with the Index's karmic consequences, where for every 40 he has, he gets clash power down. And so, like, if he doesn't do any damage at all to the prescript's target in the first 4 turns, then he gets -2 clash power for the rest of the fight, which is very important, considering the fact that he gets a lot of extra clash power and just by nature of being an Index identity. And it's like, that's another big thing about, like, him being the Index, because the status effect of the prescript's target, it gives you a permanent -2 skill power on every single one of your skills, which honestly, for the regular clashing skills, it doesn't matter that much, unless you're using a weak identity like base Ryoshu. But the more important effect of that is specifically with the evade, right? Because -2 power on evade is very impactful, especially when you get later in the fight, when he's constantly at like 45 sanity, so he's always rolling heads on the coins, and it becomes very likely for you to just, you know, miss the evade. The good thing about it, though, is the fact that, like, specifically with the evade, the -2 skill power from being the Index, the prescript's target, it only applies to the very first skill that you evade, considering the fact that, like, after that, it just stops interacting with it for some reason. I don't exactly know why, but it's something about, like, the ability for, you know, evade skills to be reused. It just ignores the -2 base power from the prescript's target. Yeah, the first Furiosa, it's pretty dangerous, because it's like, even if you win this clash, right, there's still a chance that Rain could just straight up kill you, you know? Because how much damage it actually does is very just random, considering the fact that, like, you know, every single coin does different damage types. And then also he has a bit of poise on himself, so every single coin has the potential to crit. Which means if you get unlucky and he crits with a coin that's doing, you know, fatal damage, in our case, blunt, then it's just like, he does substantially more damage than he could actually end up killing you with this attack, even if you know, are resistant to wrath damage and are at full HP. Like, it's happened before. It's happened a couple of times, you know, in some attempts where he just kills you because, yeah, it's entirely random the amount of damage he does with that attack. But basically, the whole strategy of this fight is you can only tank one Furiosa, right? So after you tank that first attack, then it becomes basically a DPS check because you have 4 turns until he uses Furiosa again, right? And if he lands that attack at all, you just die. There's nothing you can do about it. So you have to trigger his phase transition before he can actually use that attack. And it's like at this point, he's also like constantly regaining sanity, so actually winning clashes and more importantly, evading his attacks become very, very difficult. Especially because like the main like power that Ryoshu gets from her evade comes from having charge count, right? And like the first attack he uses in a turn, you can only really beat it with her skill 3, which consumes a whole lot of charge count and therefore removes a ton of her base power for her evade. And because of that, it's like most of the time I end up using, you know, just her base ego to clash with it instead. Because even though it like makes it less likely for you to roll heads, the fact that the base power is substantially higher by just having charge on you at the start of the fight makes it significantly more consistent, especially because that first evade is affected by the index's prescript. So yeah, you want to clash with the ego so that you have the charge count to counteract that prescript's target debuff. Because for every subsequent one, it's like it's not there, and therefore the base power from the charge count matters a whole lot less. And it also has the added benefit of, you know, her base ego applies to fragile, which is very important when you're like racing against the clock with against doing enough damage, right? And it's like the DPS check is also another reason why you want to use Ryoshu's new ego, whatever it's called, I don't remember. And from what I do remember, it's like I'm probably gonna butcher it if I even try to pronounce it. But anyways, it's definitely her strongest ego in terms of like just raw damage. So yeah, using it to you know, trigger the phase transition to phase 2 before he can use the second Furiosa is almost required, I'd say.
이 상처는 치료할 필요가 없었어. 네가 집에 돌아오면 결국 이 상처는 다시 달아오를 텐데 미리 익숙해지는 게 낫지 않겠니?
내가 여기 남기라도 할 것처럼 말하는군.
딸, 너만 남아있으면 돼. 그러면 거미집은 사라지지 않아. 그러니 가지 마렴.
What else is there? I guess I could talk more about like the actual base Ryoshu attempt that I did, because it was actually pretty close. Like we got this far, all the way up until like, you know, the phase transition, but she just did not have enough damage to be able to get into the second phase. Like theoretically she could, right? Because every one of base Ryoshu's skill 3s gives her 2 slash damage up, which means you could theoretically have her ego attack, because it does do slash damage. You could theoretically have it doing like an extra 100% damage, and that would be enough to probably knock him into phase 2. But then you have the problem of, you know, her just having absolutely terrible clash power. And that's the real killer, right? Because one of the only reasons why I even was able to get close enough with base Ryoshu is because I used Moritosis to be able to bridge the gap between the first Furiosa and the second one. And that only lasts 3 turns, right? So it's like it wears off after the second Furiosa, and then it's like you're in the second phase at that point, and he has a whole lot more clash power here. So yeah, it's like even though base Ryoshu can theoretically, in my opinion, get into the second phase, I don't think she can actually beat the second phase because she just does not have the clash power for it. And that's honestly why, like, Corp Ryoshu is one of the few that can actually beat this fight. Because she has enough damage to actually do it, and she has enough clash power to not have to rely on Moritosis. Also, you may have noticed, like, there was a bit of a cut there between the first phase and the second phase because, yeah, these are 2 different attempts, basically. Of course, it's like the first few turns are all identical. It's just we have more health now at this point because, like I said, the amount of damage he does with Furiosa is entirely random, depending entirely on how he crits. And also, it's like this is why you make sure you always slot in 2 evades, no matter what. Like, honestly, getting really lucky with his Furiosa damage roll being like very low in this actual successful attempt, that's what really saved the game. And also, I did end up using Moritosis too to just make it more consistent, which also helps because, you know, lowering his offense level has the benefit of both increasing our clash power and also decreasing his damage output, which, because I do miss a couple of aids, like in this second phase, it's like, he probably would have killed me if I didn't use that, to be honest. And then the second phase, it's like you have to use Ryoshu's new ego again just for damage. Because just like with the second Furiosa, you need to beat him before he does it a third time, because yeah, he does do it a third time, and if you don't win the fight before that third time, you just instantly lose, because yeah, you can't evade it. And actually, in regard to that last final third Furiosa, it's like, it definitely scared me. Like, it scared me a lot because I could not beat it with Ryoshu's new ego. Like, it rolled a base minimum roll of like 25, and that was the same high roll of the ego. And it's like, I was kind of hoping that ego would be able to beat that and then, you know, just do enough damage to basically win the fight. And I kind of forgot if, like, Deaders, you know, if you don't have enough charge, it consumes your health to basically give you enough charge to be able to gain all the clash power, right? And I didn't remember if that killed you if you were low enough on health, which thankfully it doesn't actually kill you, so yeah, one skill 3 is able to finish off the fight. So yeah, very, very difficult encounter here. Like, it took me at least a full day, let me just say that much, to beat him. I wish I could have... Part of that was definitely because I was trying to do base Ryoshu, but also it's just like... He's a hard fight, man. Especially when... Like any fight where you're reliant on just evading everything, right? Because that is kind of how he works. You have to evade everything, considering you're... Like, you can't really take any damage at all in this fight, because you have to take that single first Furiosa. And then also, like, the real killer of this fight is actually the fact that Gregor is disabled and you cannot use any of his passives, which means that you don't get G-Corp Gregor, which could have absolutely, like, that alone would have been enough to give you enough health to be able to survive multiple Furiosa, let me just say that much. But yeah, because he's disabled, like, that really makes this fight difficult and, like, not very good for multiple identities to be able to beat. Basically only W Ryoshu.
하지만 딸, 잘 생각해봐. 파도는 바람이 끌어당겨줘서 모래성을 만들었어. 그리고 이제는 바람이 미는 대로 모래성을 부수는 것뿐이야. 그러니까 파도는 슬플 필요가 없는 거지.
그러면 오빠 언제 행복해져?
글쎄, 그건 찬찬히 알아가 보도록 할까? 결말을 아껴놓는 거야. 그런 다음에 딸이 아빠만큼 어른이 되고 나면 그때 보는 거지.
그래. 그럼 그때까지 매일매일 읽어주는 거야. 약속.
파도 소리가 들리는구나.
어떻게 들리지?
쓸쓸해.
훌륭한 전시회였어. 하, 이걸 오히려 고맙다고 말해야 하나?
And that's how I beat the final boss of Canto 9 using only W Corp Ryoshu. Honestly, when I first tried to do this, one of the big reasons why I even attempted with base Ryoshu is because I thought this would be like a very, very easy solo, considering the fact that you get Gebura's buff in this fight, and if you're playing it normally, it's like that buff is a permanent effect, right? Ryoshu has it for the entire fight, and that made it seem like, you know, this fight would be very easy to solo because, like, you know, with the Lei Heng fight where you get Moritosis for the entire thing, I thought it would be a similar issue here where Ryoshu has it permanently for the entirety of the fight, which would have absolutely made this fight ridiculously easy, let me just say that much. But unfortunately, it has this weird effect where if Ryoshu is on her own, it goes away. I have no idea if this is intentional or a bug, but either way, it's what makes this fight truly difficult. If it was a permanent status effect, then this fight would be very easy to solo for pretty much every Ryoshu identity, let me just say that much. But yeah, anyways, that's it for me. Like and subscribe for more videos like this one. Goodbye.